Today, we are going to talk about a case that I have been holding off on talking to you about since before I took a break from YouTube. A case in which a woman was found dead at a Pennsylvania state park and her partner claimed they were attacked, but evidence showed otherwise. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to my channel and Killer Concepts, the place where we talk about all things true crime. My name is Peyton. If you are new here, please make sure to hit that red subscribe button down below and turn on your post notifications so you do not miss any future content. As I said in the intro, this video has been a long time coming. Today we are talking about a homicide that occurred in Gifford Pinchot State Park located in northern York County, PA, back in the summer of 2020. It is pretty strange actually because I had just thought about checking up on the status of this case the other day, and when I did, there was new news. A woman by the name of Jolie Harris, who had been charged with the murder of her girlfriend Lauren Gallagher in this case, pled guilty about 2 weeks ago now to one count of causing suicide as criminal homicide. But we will get into the details of the case as well as this plea in a little bit. Since the time this incident happened, it really stuck with me. This is because I am very familiar with this state park. I have been there many times. We like to go hiking. We like to travel the East Coast to hike different trails. And I know this park like the back of my hand. I know the trails really well. When the murder occurred in 2020, it made me change the way I do certain things and made me a lot more cautious of the environment around me, especially when I am out in the wilderness. We know a lot of crimes happen in parks like this, but it makes it very real when something happens in an area or a location that you have been to many times and that you are familiar with. Luckily, this is a case where the public was not at risk, but when this first happened, nobody really knew that until the police released that information. Just remember that if you go to parks like this, even when you are with somebody, have something on you to defend yourself and try not to walk or hike alone. I myself always carry pepper spray. I always have my dog with me, and I usually have another person with me as well. Honestly, since this happened, I don't think I've hiked alone at all, actually. It made me realize that I needed to be more cautious. This video is a little bit different in the way I made it, but that is because there are going to be some video clips integrated into this video because I traveled to this park for you. I did try and be really respectful of other campers, so it's really not a whole lot of footage, but it is in there, and I think it will make it a little bit more interesting because you will actually get to see it, and because there are not many other pictures for this case. With that being said, let's get started. Keep in mind this case does have disturbing details like many of my videos. So two women who were in a long-term relationship and who actually sometimes just considered themselves married by the names of Lauren Gallagher, who was 37, and Jolie Harris, who was 40 at the time, had booked a campsite number 236 at Gifford Pinchot State Park for the duration of June 5th through June 7th, which was a weekend in 2020. Would go to the couple's campsite when the two had failed to check out of the park, and here they would find a 1998 Ford Taurus. I am going to pause for a second so I can explain something to you. So at this particular park, when you enter the campground area, there is kind of like a little guard shack with like an entrance and an exit. So this is why they would know that they didn't check out. It's not something that they could just drive right out of. Since we are not campers here at Pinchot right now, we are hiking in to the campground. Otherwise, you have to go through a gate and everything. But there's a trail that backs up to the campground, so that's where we are going. So they would find a 1998 Ford Taurus, and police were then called to the park that Monday, the 8th, at 11:29 a.m. when the park rangers reported finding suspicious items in the abandoned vehicle that reportedly belonged to Gallagher's father. So these suspicious items would include personal items, a black smartphone, and the corpse of the couple's dog. The state troopers would contact both of the women's families, and they would launch a search as neither of the families had heard from them and there was concern for their well-being. They would search for the women, but they would not locate them until that evening when another camper called 911 because they reported they had found a dead body underneath a blanket near his campsite. So that was campsite 236 that the York Dispatch reported was where the two had rented to stay. We didn't do too much footage because there was a lot of campers around and we want to be respectful of the other people in the area. What is so interesting about this is I had read that the state troopers actually did bring in canines to try and find these two women. As I walked this campground, it's not huge. So the fact that the canines did not find these women was just very surprising to me. You would think that they would have located them, but I'm sure there is things we always miss because from what I read, they were found pretty close to their campsite. So the time of the discovery of the body is more of a time range because my sources show anywhere from 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. So I'm not really sure which one is accurate and which one is the correct time. So I'm just giving you about a 2-hour time frame from 6:30 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. on June 8th is when they would be located. So when the man located a person underneath the blanket near his campsite, he would try to check the condition of the person, and this is when Jolie Harris, who was under the blanket, would expose her face to him and ask for help. At this time, the man would also find the dead body of 37-year-old Lauren Gallagher. According to reports, this was near the location of 800 Camping Area Road. Keep in mind, this is a very general location as it is the entrance to the camping area within Gifford Pinchot State Park, so it's not very specific. Harris would tell the man while he was still on the phone with 911 that the two women had been assaulted by an unknown person. Gallagher had been killed by that person and that she was, quote, bleeding everywhere, end quote. When troopers would arrive at the scene, all the articles I have found note that they did not really notice any active bleeding injuries on Harris herself. Harris would be transported to York Hospital to determine the extent of her injuries, and she was determined to have suffered a superficial scratch to the front of her neck, a laceration on her left wrist, and a bruise on her thigh, according to the police in this case. So here is where the case starts to get pretty strange. Harris would end up claiming when talking to police that she did not have any memory or recollection of the last few days, and that she did not even remember reserving the campsite for herself and her longtime girlfriend. The hospital would obviously do a CT scan because they wanted to make sure she did not have any head injuries or head trauma because of her loss of memory, or what she was saying was her loss of memory. And Harris herself had said she had not been using drugs or alcohol, so there was no real reason why she wouldn't remember the past few days. The CT would say that she did have no head trauma. So like I said, there's really no reason for the loss in memory. So Harris would be released from the hospital after about 12 hours of being there, and the police investigation would continue, but the investigation would quickly gather momentum, and I mean extremely quick. Police would inspect Gallagher's deceased body, and they would see that she had a large bleeding bruise on her forehead. Not only this, but her throat had been slit and her windpipe had been cut. The county coroner would rule Lauren Gallagher's death as a homicide. Near where Harris and Gallagher were found, the police would locate a cobalt utility knife with what appeared to be dried blood on it, as well as a black rock. But this wasn't just any black rock. Penn Live reports that this was not like any other rock in the area and may have even been a crystal-filled geode. While it was not like any other rocks in the area, it was similar to rocks that had been found in Gallagher's vehicle. So state troopers would say that this rock appeared to have dried blood and hair on it, but that there was no evidence of a struggle where the two women had been found. So it was very unusual because the crime scene, or what they believed to be the crime scene itself, had no signs of struggle. So police would look into Harris's bank records, and they would find that her debit card and her name had been the one that was used to reserve the campsite through Pinchot's website, as well as receipts that proved the two women had traveled from Delaware County to York County on Friday, June 5th, 2020. Even though Harris said that she had no recollection of any of this. I said previously that when the abandoned car was located, a black cell phone was also found inside. So this black cell phone ended up belonging to Jolie Harris, and so police would begin to do a search of her phone just like they would anybody else's, and they found the following pretty interesting search history on the device. So on May 30th at 5:26 p.m., quote, "What percentage of murder in the U.S. is domestic violence?" end quote, had been searched. June 7th at 10:55 a.m., quote, "Does antifreeze have a taste?" end quote, was searched. Fox 43 reports that the antifreeze search was followed by several other inquiries and search terms and a review of URL links related to antifreeze poisoning. Police said that a screenshot of how long it takes antifreeze poisoning to kill a human was found in the phone's gallery to go along with this. So later in the same day, on June 7th at 11:26 a.m., quote, "windpipe location," end quote, would be searched. This would include a diagram of the upper torso, neck, and head of a human. This diagram focused on the trachea, which is the actual name for what we call our windpipe. A screenshot of this diagram was on the phone as well in the gallery. Obviously, all of these searches would be huge red flags for the police, as they all made Harris look very guilty. She was still alive. Her girlfriend was dead, especially the search that had to do with the windpipe, because Lauren Gallagher's windpipe had been cut. So this couldn't be a coincidence. It didn't make sense for it to be a coincidence. There was just too many things that were making Harris's story of being attacked seem less and less likely and less plausible. With all of this, on Wednesday, June 10th, 2020, 40-year-old Jolie Harris would be charged with 1 count of criminal homicide and was accused of killing 37-year-old Lauren Gallagher. There would be no real movement or updates on this case until very recently, Tuesday, April 30th, 2024. Jolie Harris, who was now 44, would enter a guilty plea. However, this guilty plea was not really what I expected at all. It isn't a normal homicide charge. Instead, she pled guilty to 1 count of causing suicide as criminal homicide in the 2020 death of 37-year-old Lauren Gallagher. Her other charges originally were murder of the 1st degree and a charge of murder of the 3rd degree, and these were both dismissed at her hearing as part of the plea, according to ABC 27 and the York Dispatch. I'm not familiar with what the charge of causing suicide as criminal homicide is, so I had to do a little bit more research for you. So per Chapter 25, Title 18, Crimes and Offenses, Homicide, by the PA Assembly, quote, a person may be convicted of criminal homicide for causing another to die by suicide only if he intentionally causes such suicide by force, duress, or deception, end quote. To me, this is really interesting because it is essentially committing homicide, but what I'm getting from this is that it is in place of suicide. So I'm guessing it is basically killing someone so they don't have to commit suicide or the act themselves, but it is not considered the same as aiding in a suicide or assisted suicide. That is a separate charge. Like I said, for me, this is a very murky area as it is not something I am familiar with at all. So do not take my word 100% for it. You got the definition. That's just the way I'm interpreting it at this moment. And it is not at all what I expected in this case, and I am sure others have not as well. I do not see any information as to why this is what she was able to plead guilty to. All I know is that her sentencing for this is scheduled for August 22nd at 1 p.m. with the judge, Harry Ness. Harris is being kept at the York County Jail. So Harris was originally facing around 40 years in prison, but the York Dispatch reports that her sentence would now be capped at 15 years, which is a lot less. So Harris is 44 now. They most likely would probably count the 4 years that she's been in jail. So she would probably be out of jail by age 55, which I just don't know if it seems like it's a long enough time for how brutal Lauren Gallagher died. But we don't have all the information, so it's really hard to assume things. So the York Dispatch also noted that an admission that was made by Harris at the hearing is what made her case no longer considered a homicide or a normal homicide. In the Title 18 or Chapter 25, Title 18 section, it did say it's still considered under criminal homicide. It's just not the first degree murder charge that she had originally been charged with. So it's not, I'm guessing it's kind of changing the cause of death to suicide, but until this is done, I don't believe we will have all of the information and the answer as to why Harris was able to plead to this. The method seems very strange, though, for someone to be murdering someone with because that person wants it, if that makes sense. It does not seem like something quick and painless, and then there is the search history. If Gallagher wanted to commit suicide, if that is where they are going with this case, then was it both Harris and herself doing these searches together on Harris's phone? I don't know. I just have so many questions. It is very strange. Like I said, this is not what I expected at all in this case. I've been following it for the past 4 years. I can't find any of the answers. It does not seem like any of the sources have the answers at the moment as well. So Lauren Gallagher, who was murdered, whether an assisted suicide or not, was someone's family member. She was a Delaware County native and held a bachelor's degree in business, and she was even working towards her master's degree. York Dispatch notes that her obituary describes her as a self-employed author. My heart goes out to her family, and I just hope they get a resolution in this case that they are happy with. They will never get her back, but I at least hope that they can get some kind of peace. This guilty plea has been years in the making. I honestly do not know why this took so long, but I feel really bad for her family, and we'll just have to see what more is to come. When you look at the criminal court docket and court summary for this case, there are a lot of different entries. There were times where it says the defendant was not ready. Then you have multiple motions for continuance. I'm really curious if the defendant maybe was being treated mentally for something. And then you have waiting for a non-jury trial, and then that is dismissed. And then more recently, it looks like The case was actually headed for a jury trial until the guilty plea was entered, and then the trial was canceled as well. I do want to note that under the charges on Harris's court docket, it lists the offense date as June 5th of 2020, which would be the day both women arrived at the park, 2 days before they were even found. Like I said, I have a lot of questions, but this is all I can really give you right now. Also keep in mind that if the offense date was June 5th, 2020, then that means, I believe that means that's when the crime occurred, which means that it would have happened before Harris had done some of the searches on her phone, if that makes sense. So like I said, that is all I can really give you for now. This case has been on my mind for years, as I said, and my heart goes out to her family. Like I always tell you, we talk about these cases because we can learn from them. If you or anyone you know may be having thoughts of suicide, please call the suicide hotline. You can now just call 988 or text them and they can help you out. I also have the resources down below for multiple things, including domestic violence, which we don't really know yet, but also could have been a factor in this case. Before you go, please make sure to hit that red subscribe button down below and turn on your post notifications so you do not miss any future content. If you have any case suggestions, please send them to killerconceptsvlog@gmail.com or comment them down below. You can also find any of my sources that I use. There's a lot for this case down in the description box. And if you would like to follow me on social media, all those links are down in the description box as well. Before you go, just remember that the world's most dangerous minds hide in the most unlikely places. Stay safe.